There are many interesting exhibits of ancient weapons kept in museums, and among them there are some very strange specimens. Some of them look so incredible that you can't help but want to figure out their functionality based on the modern level of civilization. Let's take a look at the Vajra sword in one of the European museums. The hilt is made in the form of a Spanish or Tibetan Vajra. There are studies and videos on the channel showing that the Vajra is a type of ancient electric weapon or tool, depending on how it is used, based on a principle that is still unknown today. Then it turns out that a sword with such a hilt is not just a sword, although some claim that this is just a coincidence. And here there are marks and rulers engraved on the rapier. What were they needed for? Perhaps this is an artilleryman's stiletto for measuring the diameter of cannonballs and calculating the range of a shot. Tables. This is the Hartmann scale, the ratio of the cannonball's weight to its caliber. And even if the cannons were energy weapons and the cannonballs served a completely different function, in any case, the need for aiming and calculating various parameters remains. Here are illustrations from medieval treatises and editions of Daga Trezubets, but also with tables and numbers applied. That is, their owners not only fenced with them, but also made calculations for firing the weapons of that time. A rapier with deflectors for sliding the opponent's blade, for parrying, a rare weapon. Apparently, not everyone knew how to use it. Special skill was required. Moreover, these blades and dagger tridents had spring mechanisms built into them. A highly technological weapon for its time. A 17th century rapier from Germany. After 10-20 minutes of fencing, your hand will be blistered. Because of this kind of chain wrapping, using gloves can reduce the damage to your hand, but maybe what we're seeing here is actually an electric winding of the pike. A device for some kind of measurements, and an extremely strange sword designed so its owner can catch an opponent's blade, wrench it out of their hand, or even break it. But most people imagine that back in those days, the 16th and 17th centuries, there were only smooth rapiers, swords, and blades. In reality, the arsenal was huge. The Flamberge rapier was a rare weapon, designed to leave slashing, jagged wounds. But, as they write, it was fragile, so it did not become widespread. The Indian cobra sword is ritual, and as usual, everything that isn't for combat is for ritual, just like the Vajra. Let's look at a 16th century illustration. Here you can see an analogy to what is visible in part of a medieval drawing and to a spectacle based on a Tesla coil. There is no official answer as to what is depicted in this part of the engraving, but logic suggests that what is shown are corona discharges, and this can only happen in a strong electrostatic field. The blades of some participants in this show have a wavy shape precisely because of this kind of static electricity. Knight armor is not just protection from cold weapons, but from discharges. Pay attention to the knight's feet. With toes like that, it's impossible to move around. The official explanation for long-nosed shoes, also known as poulaines, is that they were a sign of wealth. The richer you were, the longer the toes. That's a nice explanation, but could you even walk at all with toes like that without tripping over the ground? Here's something similar from another edition. Meyer Friedrich, Master of Arts and Fireworks, 1594. So, did they use fireworks and fire in demonstration duels? Or did this illustration with images of discharges on shields make it into this book? Musket-axe. Why does a musket need such a complicated handle? There is an explanation that among some peoples it was customary not to fence using wrist movements, but to strike, as they say, from the shoulder, holding the sword firmly in the hand without using the wrist. Here are examples. The talwar saber or the khanda broadsword. Pay attention to the small handle. It turns out such a saber was either meant for a child or for a dwarf. There are plenty of artifacts confirming that in the 16th and 17th centuries, people were of average height, both much shorter and much taller. That is giants. Chronicles of Amtlicher Berner, 1474. These illustrations show what cannons were needed for and how they originally worked. These were supposedly battering machines, and they destroyed walls only at close range. Here is another historical version that explains the numerous inconsistencies in the design of cannons. When researchers of history with views different from the official ones visit museums and make their own notes, shoot videos, history begins to play not only with new colors but also becomes filled with paradoxes, mysteries, and riddles. Let's get acquainted with some exhibits of the Military Historical Museum of Artillery, Engineers and Signal Corps in St. Petersburg. The museum was founded in the year 1703 in the first years of the official founding of St. Petersburg, and right away a museum. Perhaps this place was simply filled with secondary artifacts that were found during the restoration of a more ancient city. Such a theory about the northern Palmyra has long excited the minds of supporters of alternative history. Interesting exhibits are displayed inside the museum. This is a musket from the 17th century, but with a design that was 250 years ahead of its time, because it was only in the mid-19th century that Krupp began producing guns with a wedge breech. But that's not all. This gun also has a rifled barrel and fired elongated projectiles. Here is the principle by which the gun was loaded. This is the 17th century. And this is despite the fact that during the Napoleonic Wars this was much later. Officially, they fired cannons with front loading using cannonballs. Here is another 27mm iron-banded musket, also with a wedge breech and vertical locking. If such weapons have survived in museums not as single specimens, it means these weapons were mass-produced. Then why do historians show us military actions using cannons that only fire cannonballs? Multi-charge weapons are also from the 17th century, cannons that were ahead of their time. What is this forgotten military technology? A breech-loading musket, 3 aspids 5 meters long, rifled 17th century. It looks very much like a modern anti-tank rifle. A rifled cannon barrel, year 1661. But historians tell us that only during the Crimean War did it become clear that the future belonged to cannons with rifled barrels. The craftsmen who made weapons 200 years ago were mistaken and misguided. A rapid-fire battery of 105 barrels of 18mm guns was activated with a single strike. An experimental cannon with a rectangular cross-section for firing 3 cannonballs at once, or what was it shooting there? The beginning of the century. A mortar battery of 25 barrels. The cannons are mounted on a rotating drum. Mid-18th century, a mortar battery of 44 barrels from the mid-18th century, a rifled cannon barrel, also from the mid-century. The description states that the ceremonial rocket was used in the Crimean War in the middle of the century. This model is made at a scale of 1:2. In the video by the author from the channel Historicheski Volnodumet, who, while studying the exhibits, asks interesting questions that we are unlikely to get answers to. So huge guns, knight's armor and oddities in cannons from different times are just part of the strange things in this museum that the author showed in the video. Of course, official history has an explanation for such a technological gap in the military exhibits. One thing didn't catch on, while another was too costly to make. And no one is willing to acknowledge the chronological pauses in the development of technologies or even the rollback of technologies. However, knowing about the planetary catastrophes that happened in recent times, it would be easy to explain all these technological inconsistencies. And now let's take a look at the traces of the impact of an unknown ancient weapon. In one of the V-Contactor groups, I came across a photo of locale melting on brickwork. This is clearly melting on the bricks. They are a defect in the bricks. The place is located in India, the Nalanda complex. Overall, the Nalanda complex is a very interesting place with some intricate structures or their remains. It is included in the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization World Heritage List. For those interested, you can read the official history online. But we were interested in it from the point of view of the melting temperature of materials and in general the way it was affected. The melting temperature of red brick is about 1200 degrees, and in open air on a wall the temperature has to be even higher, since there is heat exchange, convection and power dissipation. What kind of combustible materials could this have been done with in the past? Let's think about it without digressing into things like ray weapons based on unknown principles or ancient blasters. Judging by the shapeless melted spot, the cause is of a different nature. Examples of brick melting exist even in the not-so-distant past. For example, a brick literally becomes liquid and starts to flow. Fort Zverev, located near Kronstadt, has a room where a fire melted the brick vaults. and this is the Alexandrovsky Caponier of the Bratsk fortress. This is an enclosed space, and high temperatures could have been created in them from burning fuel. Gasoline burns at a temperature of 1300 degrees, and the airflow in the catacombs can create a blast furnace effect by supplying oxygen, and it's unclear how some bricks could melt while the neighboring ones do not. It looks like a very rapid heating in the form of a blot. The combustion temperature of white phosphorus is also about 1300 degrees, but it doesn't stick to the walls, it's a powder. So it had to be converted into a napalm-like state. Although napalm is made from gasoline and thickeners, there is even a modern high-temperature napalm. The temperature of its combustion reaches up to 1600 degrees when magnesium and alkali metals are added. It's unclear whether something similar could have been created in ancient times. There are mentions in history about Greek fire. Officially, its recipe was lost in the 16th century. According to ancient writings, it was used by the Byzantines during naval battles. It looked like this. In the Bible, the burning of the grey cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which was discovered and confirmed by American researchers in the 90s and by an Israeli expedition in 2016, and here is an ancient analog of a flamethrower. Such examples have been preserved. This is called a siphonophore or kyrosiphon for Greek fire. Judging by the design of this weapon, it was used for throwing fire, not cannonballs. Greek fire, according to modern assumptions, consisted of oil, saltpeter as an inorganic oxidizer, and sulfur. In descriptions, it is mentioned that it could not be extinguished with water, and this is already an element of modern super napalm, which burns at a temperature of 1600 degrees, which is enough to melt bricks. So, it seems that we will have to draw our own conclusions about what the weapons of past centuries were like based on facts and observations, as well as form our own opinions about what really happened in the Middle Ages. Subtitles created by